what an intro. Feel like a rock star. Hopefully I'm not going to disappoint anyone. Hey, new people. So I am Cynthia of Savard, first of her name, Director of UX at Shopify, author of Tragic Design, killer of Houseplant, and mother of a 15-month-old dragon. And no, I have it, thank you. On clicker. So for those that do not get the Game of Thrones reference, I am Director of Design at Shopify, and I co-wrote a book called Tragic Design. However, my talk today is not going to be about the book Tragic Design itself, because I want you to buy the book and, yeah, buy my book. So in design school, we study great designers in hopes of creating our own one day. And if we're lucky, we had a single 3-hour-long class called on user experience, and our teachers probably call this human-computer interaction. After school, we select the very best pieces of our work, and we put it into our portfolio. We dump the rest, the bad and ugly stuff, into an archive folder. And if you're like me, you even rename that folder to something completely irrelevant to make sure that no one ever sees this again. And thankfully, no user will ever have to deal with the consequences of the terrible design decisions that you made as a student. But by allowing for our design stuff to blissfully disappear and not caring about the consequences of what we do, our teachers are not teaching us that what we build in real life has real-life consequences. They're not telling us that as designers, we have a lot of power to shape how people use and interact with our objects. And to quote my very good friend Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. By the way, that's not Spider-Man, that's the uncle, depending if you look at the movie or the comic books, but for the sake of simplicity, yeah, a single person is laughing right now. So in design school, we think that the worst that could happen is that we get a C- in a class. After school, we think that the worst that could happen is that design turns out ugly. But when you look at the top 50 best e-commerce websites online, they all share one thing in common: ugliness. So ugliness should not, the fear of designing something ugly should not stop anyone from creating and innovating. It is not a big deal. No one ever died of ugliness. So on the scale, design can be worse than ugly. It can actually be hostile. And in order to explain what hostile design is, I need to talk a little bit about affordance. So affordance, for those of you that don't know, I know you guys all know, is what a shape would tell you if a shape could talk. Oh, someone took a picture. Wait. Good. So for example, that triangle would tell you that it's a triangle, and that rectangle would tell you that it's a rectangle. But if you magically just round the corners of that rectangle and add a drop shadow, magically this rectangle is now begging you to press it. So when something is affordable, it doesn't need instructions. And video games are all about affordance. Who here has played Mario? That's what I expect usually. So when you played Mario, you just knew that you could jump on Goomba. You knew that it wouldn't kill you because it had a rounded back. And you didn't need instructions, and I know for a fact you didn't need it, because I'm willing to bet $5 that no one ever read the instructions. Because if you had, you would know that little Goomba is a mushroom who betrayed the Mushroom Kingdom. And Koopa Troopa is a soldier of the Turtle Empire. His orders are to find and destroy Mario. So obviously, affordance is not only a digital concept. The same way that you knew that you should not touch Spinny. This is going too fast. The same way that you knew that you should not touch Spinny, you know that you shouldn't touch a hedgehog. or anything that has spikes. Hedgehogs, they don't come with instructions. Everyone knows that you shouldn't touch them. Even this kitten knows that it shouldn't touch a hedgehog. And they don't come with instructions because kittens can't read. So the same way the kitten knows they shouldn't touch the hedgehog, would you sit on that bench? Or sleep on any of these, for that matter? I know that I wouldn't, but it's not a problem for me or for you because I have a very comfortable bed waiting for me at home. These designs that decides who gets to use it, what caste of the population can use it, are quite bad. This is what we call hostile architecture. And it would be easy to say that the lack of empathy comes from the designer. But in reality, that's not what happens. The designer works for a client. So it could be a lack of empathy, but that lack of empathy doesn't come from the designer. It's our role as designers to advocate for our users, but this is really hard to do sometimes when the person paying you wants you to do something else. So it is important that today we recognize that design is a powerful tool. It's powerful both for environmental purposes, political purposes, and social purposes. Hostile design exists in architecture, but it also exists online. And the equivalent of hostile architecture is what I call dark patterns. I don't call that. Everyone calls that dark patterns, to be clear. So this is an example. You don't have to read the whole thing. This was specifically designed for you to be confused. So we're on Royal Mail's website, and the first paragraph tells you that if you do not wish to receive any communication, you need to tick the relevant boxes. And in the second paragraph, it tells you that if you do wish to receive any communication, you need to tick the boxes. So if you're confused right now and trying to understand what you should be ticking if you do not want to receive any information, that's normal. It's what I call a trammel net. A trammel net is a two-layer net trying to catch fishes, and if it doesn't get you on the first layer, it always gets you on the second layer. So dark patterns are quite bad. And when we think of bad design, we often think that the designer is lousy or inexperienced or not good. But dark patterns are quite the opposite. They're designed by quite great designers that actually know how people's brain works. They're designed to trick people into doing stuff, and they're quite prevalent online. So you might wonder, if they're that bad, why are they everywhere? Well, that's because it works. But when I hear that it works, I always remind myself and the person telling me that it works at converting a single metric. For example, a clickbait will be really great to increase the amount of people clicking on a link. But is it really good for the conversion after that? Is it really good for the buyer experience? Will it lead to more returns? This is something really important, and whenever you're faced with a client or a manager that wants you to design a dark pattern, do remind them that you have to zoom out of the single metric you're designing for. Not only that, but you might end up saving a lot of money for your company. Recently, LinkedIn, by sending emails on behalf of their users, were fined $13 million. I don't know in heights, I think it's times 2.2, so like 30 million something. So sometimes it is necessary to resign and compromise. However, it's important that when you do make that compromise and end up implementing a single dark pattern for a client, that you try to educate yourself and the client. Next time, don't turn and don't compromise. Also, define your own ethical code. An ethical code is really important. You should write it down, and you should know what you're willing to do as a designer and what you are not willing to do as a designer. For example, I know that I wouldn't be comfortable working with a firearm company. I might work with them if it was to educate people on how to use it, but I would refuse to work for them if it's in order to increase the sales. That's my ethical code. So we know that design can be hostile, but it can also be cruel. Cruel in a way that it hurts people. And the first way that a design can be cruel is because of inadvertent algorithmic cruelty. So in 2014, Facebook created that year in review app. In order to increase engagement, they pre-filled that carousel with the pictures that had the biggest amount of likes. That was before the creation of reactions. So you could only like something or don't do anything with it. So for people that had a beautiful year, that was great. But it did a mistake. It didn't consider that some people had a bad year that they did not want to be reminded of. Here's what your year looked like, with balloons and streamers and people dancing around pictures of your deceased daughter or your apartment in flames. Facebook designers are no different than me and you. They're not power machines. They have flaws and they make mistakes, and they're really intelligent and really good designers at the same time. They did this single mistake of not respecting. So when I say they did not respect the user's decision, I'm saying that it's fine if it's good for almost all of your users to do this. That's great, let's do it. It did create a lot of joy for many people. However, the mistake there was that people could not dismiss it. So if you were forced upon a picture of your deceased daughter on your Facebook feed, it would come back every day, every time you connected to Facebook. This is the mistake that they did. So it's really important to respect your user's decision. In real life, we call this being polite, and being polite in interface design is the same. Another way that design can be cruel is through a lack of emotional intelligence. So when Whitney Houston died, I wrote on Facebook, I will not sing, but I will always love you. This is so sad. To me and to my friends, this was clear that it was a reminder that as a kid and as a teenager, I really liked that song. But to my dad, he thought that I had left my boyfriend. So he called me, wondering how I was doing, if I was depressed, if I wanted to discuss and talk. And while I do appreciate how my father showed emotional intelligence, I cannot help but notice that Facebook doesn't allow for emotional intelligence. And this is really important because your brain no longer makes the difference between an emoticon and an emotion. More pictures. There's a rule that says if you put something on a slide, people will take pictures of that quote. It works really well. So let's go back to how your brain does not make a difference between a smiley and a smiling face. Researchers have researched it, and they found that by showing a smiley face and a smiling face, and then looking at the brain, that the reaction was very similar. So this is a problem because with the introduction of reactions on Facebook, it does add a lot more empathy because people now like for the right reason. They don't like just to show that they've read your message. But what do you do with these 5 emotions? Imagine that your friend just called you or just posted a message saying that they're finally feeling better after a week of being sick. What do? You're like, yay, good job, cool, love it. The next day, they announced that they finally got the job that they were hoping for at Shopify or any other place, but we're hiring. So what do? You're like, yay, yay? And then the week after they announced that they're pregnant, what can you do? So the spectrum of emotional reaction is not nuanced enough. When we have real-life interactions, we understand how people speak, we understand the gestures that they're doing. There's a bunch of micro interactions and emotions that you get. The brain is able to understand all these micro interactions, and I know for a fact that Facebook does not offer that reaction. Recently, I received a message from LinkedIn, and as you might have guessed, I'm not a big fan of messages from LinkedIn, so I had to dislike it for it to go in my junk folder. Disliking an email from LinkedIn is fine. I don't like it. I don't mind. But the problem is that when I received my credit card statement, it went in my junk folder. And for it to go in my inbox, I had to like it. Let me be clear, I do not like my credit card statement. So you might be wondering, well, it's just an icon, right? Like, what's the big deal? Why are you talking about this on stage? Because icons and reactions are a big deal. By changing the rating system from stars to hearts, Airbnb saw an increase of engagement of 30%. This is significant. So it is our job to wonder if the word or the icon that we put on actions really reflect what the user is experiencing at that point. Another way design can be cruel is by forgetting the 10%. So a colleague of mine recently had a personal encounter with this. While they were at work, they received a phone call. It was from her sister's doctor. And her sister that had been battling cancer for years were in a very critical condition. So my friend had to go all the way from Ottawa to Toronto. And for those of you that don't know, that's a 5-hour drive. So she's driving over there, and she's stressed, and she had to bring her dog because she couldn't find someone to take care of the dog, and her mom is in the car, and it's a very difficult situation, obviously. But while they were driving there, she received a phone call. She received a phone call from a sister on FaceTime. And she later shared with me, "I'm grateful that technology has evolved so that I was able to have those critical moments through this small device in my pocket." Her sister was calling all of her friends and family members to say her final words. However, while she was on the phone with her sister, she received a message, and the phone call was cut short. I remember when FaceTime was launched, it showed a bunch of people telling another bunch of happy people how much they like each other and love each other and sharing kisses and pregnant pictures. That's great. But I wonder what that advertising would look like in other situations. Oh.
What do you think? Do you like it? You see that? Can you apologize? Thanks, Lincoln. Hi, guys.
Every day, more people connect face-to-face on the iPhone than any other phone.
So take a moment to think about the most important phone call of your life. Was it your wife announcing that she's pregnant? Or your friend in a car accident that needs help? Or a company announcing that you just got the job? And now imagine this call being cut short. Not available for FaceTime. What does that even mean? Do the person has to change their settings? Do they have to change their connections? Is there an issue with the device itself? Is there an issue on the other side? My friend told me at one point, I wonder if she had died on the phone with me. It's in these situations that we realize that this is design. It is our responsibility, it's our job description to think about this. This doesn't mean changing the whole product for something else. It doesn't mean not designing something. It means taking care of these error messages. It's important to learn about the different emotions to design for these emotions. As designers, we tend to say that we're very empathetic and we know how people feel because we observe them. But in reality, when I ask people to name reactions and emotions, they're not able to name more than 7, 10, maybe. What I recommend is for people to look and learn about emotions, which might sound like a very simple concept, but this is a Plutchik wheel of emotions, and it's really interesting. What it tells you basically is that there's 7 basic emotions, 5 to 7 depending on what framework you're using, and then every emotion can be merged with another one to create a new emotion. So for example, between ecstasy and admiration, you have love. And between admiration and terror, you have submission. While you can agree that this is perfectly accurate or not, it does add more nuance and more words for you when you're designing and showing presentations. For example, you can use this Plutchik wheel of design when you're doing user testing and have people map their own reaction on it. I can tell you that presenting that 2 participants were loathing your experience, one was furious and the other felt anger, is a lot more powerful than just saying that 4 people were unhappy. Our brain can show empathy and can understand metrics, but it cannot do both at the same time. And this is true of everyone's brain. Therefore, when you are presenting results of user testing or just ideas to stakeholders in your company and people that don't get design as much as you do, make sure you do present both of them separately. Show some hard data, and then show some more fluffy data or soft data. So design can be cruel, but that's not even the worst thing that it can be. Design can actually be deadly. And I say deadly not in a metaphorical way. Like when you say the next time that you see an email written in Comic Sans, a kitten might die. It can kill in a very real way, and this is an example. So in the Shopify office, we have alarm systems. And there's a wiki page, an internal wiki page for employees that tells us how the alarm system works. And in it, we learned that there are 2 alarms. One that tells you that you should be prepared to leave immediately. So you should take your things, and actually don't take your things. You should just leave the building right away. The second type of alarm tells you that you should prepare in case of an emergency. So you can gather your things, you need to listen, you can look around, it could be a drill. And it tells you that there's 2 different tones for these alarms. So we're going to do a little test right now. Don't exit the building. But by a show of hand, I'll show you one of the 2 alarms, and I need you to tell me if you would prepare or exit the building. Listen carefully. So, show of hand, would you exit the building right away? Oh, guys, you would have died. That's horrible. That's a really good example of really, really bad sound design and instruction design as well. When writing the instructions, they didn't take into consideration that when the alarm rings, you have no comparison point. You don't know what the bad alarm sounds like. I have other examples of how design can be deadly. And this one is a personal example. So in 2007, I was traveling across Central America with my two best friends, and we were backpacking, so it's quite scrappy, on a shoestring. And in our quest to find all the beautiful jewels of Central America, we went to Rio Dulce, to this very famous hostel. It's a hostel on Pilotes, and in order to get there, you have to take a 15-minute boat ride to get there. So you cannot access this island by foot. While we were there, for breakfast, my friend ordered cereals, and we soon learned that the cereal contained almonds. As you probably have guessed at this point, my friend is deadly allergic to nuts, all nuts. And thankfully, he was always traveling with his EpiPen, or dual shot injector. We knew that he was traveling with it because he would tell us, if there's anything, I have to be the one injecting myself because I know how to do it. So when this happened, I ran to his backpack, I got his twin jet injector, and brought him over. What we did not know is that once the allergic reaction starts, the hands of the person start to spasm. What that meant is that he was not able to inject himself. So he handed me the tube and he said, like, Cynthia, you have to do it. Let me tell you that I was not prepared to inject someone. And the only thing I knew about EpiPen was like the orange. I don't know if you've seen that before, but they show you how to use it in an orange. And your friend's life is not an orange. So I tried to inject him, and I knew that this would give us 10 extra minutes to get to the hospital. Like I said, we had to take a 15-minute boat ride to get there, so we had to do that fast. But thankfully, it's a twin jet injector, so it has a second injection in it, a second dose. So while we're on the boat to get to the hospital, I tried to give my friend the second injection, and I couldn't. I just couldn't figure it out. I was mumbling with the thing, trying to understand how it worked, and I couldn't make it. So I decided to read the instructions. And for a moment, I need you to imagine what it looks like in reality. I'm on this speedboat on a river with wind in my face, and like I really feel my hair whipping my eyes as I'm trying to read this. And then I have to unroll the instructions around the tube and start reading, and there are 12 steps. And on step 9, it tells me, slide the orange color of the plunger. And I remember feeling so mad at myself for not knowing what a plunger or color was. I was telling myself, come on, Cynthia, you studied industrial design, you studied injection molding. You probably should know what this is. But I couldn't. I didn't know what to do. So I started injecting my friend, and I actually broke the thing in his leg. I stabbed my friend 11 times to save his life. And somehow it worked. Somehow he received that dose. This is my friend the day after. It's not in memoriam, like he's alive. The first time I gave that talk, I forgot to put that picture, and then the first question I received was like, is he alive? And I was like, yes, yes, he made it. Still my friend today. But my book is dedicated to my friend, because that was the first time I realized the power of design. If I had wanted to save lives in my life, I would have become a medic, a police officer, a paramedic maybe, a nurse. Not a designer. At least that's what I thought before. That's what I thought before my friend almost lost his life because of a faulty item. I now know, because I went on YouTube and looked for it, that this is the orange color from the plunger. We're going to look again because it seems so stupid when you know. And you can see that online, on YouTube, they have changed the instructions, and It tells you slide the yellow or orange color of the plunger. I don't know why I didn't know. I just remember feeling extremely stupid for not knowing. Maybe I didn't know because it wasn't orange, it was yellow. Maybe I didn't know because I'm not sure what a color in a plunger is. Or maybe because I was literally in a boat with people screaming around me. My friend was wheezing and holding some French people, random person on the boat, asking them to hold their hand and trying to breathe. And then there was the boat driver that was screaming to me in Spanish, a language that at that moment I did not master. I had no idea how long we had to go, and then I had to read stupid instructions. So it's really important to write clear error messages. Always include the next steps. Make sure you don't withhold any information from your users. If something goes wrong, you know that it can go wrong, include it. It's really useful. Your instructions can be much longer than you think they can be, because when people need it, they need it. There has been a lot of research after the fact on the twin-jet injector, and it is not available for sales anymore. Is it because people couldn't use it? I don't know. I'd like to think so. On specifically the injector, there has been other research as well that shows that most people die because they don't bring it with them, because they think that the object looks ugly. When do you think that making an object more desirable could save lives? This is an example. It's important as well to test for different emotional states. So I don't know about you, but when we do user testing, we welcome the person to our lab, and we're like, hi, welcome. We speak softly. We want to make sure they're comfortable. Would you like a coffee? Yes. Oh, great. Come with me. Let's test this interface. Don't worry. You cannot make any mistakes. If something goes wrong, it's the designer's fault. It's not yours. We say that all the time, and when they're testing, we're like, oh, you should have known that. So by making the person feel extra comfortable, we want to remove the lab effect or whatever. This is all great. I'm not saying you should stress your testers. I am saying you should pay them, by the way, but that's unrelated. What if we were to be as welcoming and warm with our testers, but for one event, for one of the scenarios, we would tell them, you know what? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to complete this task. And if you do, I give you $5 extra. Or create another stressful scenario. Oh, someone is knocking on the door. We were supposed to have 10 minutes left to our interview, but in the end, we only have 2 minutes. Let's do this. Create a small stress. I'm sure that the result will be completely different. Another very important thing is to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? You should always, in every project that you deliver, wonder, hey, could I kill someone with this? In all fairness, when's the last time that you've wondered if your work might have killed or hurt someone? My guess is that you don't ask yourself that very often, because it's not a nice question to ask yourself. But there are some tools to help you. For example, we can do a worst-case scenario brainstorm, which is actually really fun. So you bring a bunch of stakeholders and everyone working on a project, and you try to brainstorm for all the catastrophe scenarios that could happen with what you're building. You can reward the person that is the most creative. So for example, we might wonder, like, oh, Cynthia works for e-commerce. What's the worst that could happen over there? So we were working on a tracking feature for people to be able to track their packages once they've ordered something, and then they see, oh, it's now in this location. It will be at your place in 2 days. And we wondered, what's the worst that could happen with this feature? We're just helping people, right? So after doing this brainstorm, we realized that through Shopify, people sell a bunch of different things, including, potentially, medication. So what if someone was expecting their medication to be there in 2 days, and we screwed up? Maybe we did, maybe the shipping carrier did. That's not important.
The important thing is that this person is waiting for something that does a massive difference in their life. When thinking about that, you look at the different safeguards that you can put in place. Obviously, if the tracking is wrong, it is not my fault, but what I can do is inform the user that the days I'm giving might change, for example. So there are a lot of safeguards you can put in place. There are different tools that we can steal from other disciplines. For example, in the aerospace industry, they use the fault tree analysis. The fault tree analysis looks at all the different use case scenarios, and they look at what is a correct use and what is an incorrect use. And within the incorrect use, they look at the difference between mistakes, between abuse, because people will abuse your system. And they look at the correct use as well. Making a mistake when you're educated about the product is still a correct use. Using this, you can come up with actually like a really good FAQ for your users. You just build a tree, and then you can use that as well to create instructions. So when we prioritize features, we often look at a chart that looks like this, and we think, well, within my product, the features that are used by all of the people all of the time will be prioritized. That makes sense. So this is how we create a backlog of features. The problem is that the feature that might kill one person in one occasion actually lives over there. It will never get built. Therefore, it's really important that you ask yourself, if this feature could hurt or kill someone, it has to be prioritized. It has to be the first thing that you design, or one of the first things that you design. So this is an example of this. On Tumblr, the blogging platform, if you search for sad, instead of giving you results that represent sadness, they will actually stop the user and ask them, is everything okay? From there, they give you resources. If you're not feeling good, you can contact this and this organization. And these results changes depending where in the world the person is. You can try it out. I was searching a bunch of different things. Google must think that I'm really depressed right now. I was trying with sadness. It works. I work also with anorexia. It works really well. They give you resources for that as well. This is a great example of how one feature that might be a little bit annoying to most people, but could save a single person at one time, is actually very valuable. Our brains are designed to understand a multitude of emotions. And as designers, it is very trendy right now to say that you design for emotions. But what we do, in fact, is that we select the emotion we want to design for. We have to be responsible for the work that we put into this world. Because if we're not, who's going to be responsible for our failures? Engineers in the States and in Canada, maybe elsewhere in the world, have an iron ring that they receive upon graduating. They have that big ceremony, and it's a bit skull clan type of ceremony, where an older engineer receives the newest engineer and welcomes them to the community by giving them that ring. The ring serves as a reminder of their responsibility towards the public. And the myth is that the ring is made from a bridge. So in the 1900s, this is the Quebec Bridge that was being built. And during the construction, it collapsed, killing 75 people. The reason it collapsed is an error in design. After that, they collected the material from the collapsed bridge, and they created a ring from them. Engineers have that ring. Why don't we designers have a ring? So this is my question to you today. What will you find in your life that will remind you of the responsibility that you have towards your user? What will remind you that in no case should you ever kill someone? Thank you.
You talked about user testing under distress, and I've been working with an app for an MPO, and the main use case is for filing complaints about violence. And it's a main issue that I have and other designers have to make user testing that is actually closer to the actual situation of suffering a violence and wanting to file a complaint. So I don't know if you have any suggestion for that. Thank you.
That's a really difficult case where you obviously don't want to add extra stress to people that are already in a very stressful situation. So obviously my advice would be that this has to be adapted and understood differently depending on the context you're testing. I think that while you can test with people that are in that situation, I don't know. I guess I don't have enough information specifically on these people, and it would be a bad assumption for me to say that this might be good or not. So you probably know in your heart what's the best there. However, I would consider asking people that have been in that situation in the past and that feel comfortable helping other people to maybe test for this because they have the knowledge and the context in order to best understand how it would work. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.